Yeah, it was so rough, because
Yes.
I didn't want to be that single mom, right? I didn't want to fall into that statistic, unfortunately, at that time.
Hey guys, welcome to Broken Journey, the podcast. I am your host, Edva Rivera. And today I have my special guest, Crystal Robles. She's here today to talk about her journey of becoming a single mom. So, welcome, Crystal.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be on.
Same, I'm so happy you're here. Um, I want you to introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into the single mom journey.
Sure. So, as she mentioned, my name is Crystal Robles, originally from New York, but now living in the Tampa area, beautiful Sunshine State, Florida. I am a single mom. I have two daughters, the ages of 8 and 6. Um, Single mom that works from home full time, so my plate is extremely full. I love everything as far as like fashion, thrift shopping, coffee, motivation, empowering women, and just being a mom for my girls.
Oh, that is so awesome. Awesome, awesome. I am so happy to have you on here because I remember we are connected in Facebook. We did meet each other through a direct sales company, and we've remained friends from there. And
Yes.
so inspired, and my hairs are standing up right now, but I was so inspired by your story when you were talking with your childhood friend. I think her name is Maria.
Yes.
And I was like, oh my God. It kind of brings me like a little emotional because as a single mom myself, I know how the struggles are for, being a single mom. And there's so many factors in there. Sometimes you're a single mom. However, the dad is involved. And, there's some people who have that good part of having a good partner, right? And then after you separate or whatever the case may be. But in this circumstance, I know it was a little different for you. So
Hmm.
if you can talk to me a little bit about your journey of your relationship going from one way to another, and eventually having to get divorced, and what.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so a lot of people, it's like when they ask you, are you single, married, divorced, whatever, you say divorce, and then a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I'm like, "No, no, no, no. No need to be sorry.
Right.
It's, things that we go through. In my case, it was a difficult situation because my ex-husband is mentally ill. And I didn't know that marrying him. I started to learn that during the years that we were married. And at one point, it was like, all right, I need to get out of this. Cause, our life at that point, I feared for the lives of myself and for my two daughters. Um,
Right.
and, getting married and being with someone and not knowing that, like you get married and you don't expect that to happen, right? You share
No.
goals, you share dreams, you share like what a future can be. You have like this vision, this imagery in your mind of, oh, this is going to be, till death do us apart. So going through that, it was very rough because when I stated my vows, right, I meant them. But
Right.
then again, I didn't know how serious mental illness can be. And I'm not talking about like bipolar, because there's different
Right.
stages of mental illness. But
Of
it
course.
escalated. It definitely escalated to a point where it's like hallucination, delusions, manic episodes, and now unfortunately schizophrenic.
Wow.
So it was very difficult for me. At that time, I was just a stay-at-home mom, and I was doing a direct sales company. Um, that it was basically to provide extra income, like for me, not like for the household, because he was the main provider.
Right.
So when everything just hit the fan, I want to say, when I decided to separate and do what's best for me and my daughters, I literally hit rock bottom. I didn't have a job. I didn't have no income. We shared one income. He took all of that.
Oh my
I had
gosh.
to like, yeah, I had to leave where we were living at this house. I had to leave where we were living. Family and friends were helping, the ones that knew. And I literally had to start from scratch. You know, my mom, who retired from Puerto Rico, was living her life in Puerto Rico, had to come down to Florida to help me with all of this, right?
Ooh,
You know, but
girl, my hairs
thank
are standing up.
yeah, it was so rough, because
Yes,
I didn't want to be that single mom, right? I didn't want to fall into that statistic, unfortunately, at that time. And I was
right.
so upset with the world. I was so upset with God. I was like, why is this happening to me? And I
Of
literally
course.
went through a darkness season. I went through bitterness, angry. I had to
Yeah.
literally, my mom had to stay with my girls. And at that time, my daughters were about, like, my oldest, I think she just turned 4 and my youngest was 1. She just turned 1. So,
Wow.
yeah, they were both in diapers and I was like, "Okay, no, we need to potty train like ASAP." Because I can't afford to buy 2 different size of diapers.
Of
Um,
course.
so thank God that through that direct sales though, I did meet a lot of people and I remember, meeting this one woman and I had her contact information and I reached out to her because she worked at a shoe store. And at that time
Okay.
I was desperate, I was desperate. I needed a job. No one wanted to hire me because I had a 4-year gap in my resume. And I reached out to her and God just opened up everything for me because it was like, all right, yeah, there's a position opening. Can you start? Yeah, I could start tomorrow. And then another friend was working somewhere else from like a marketing research company. Then I
Mm-hmm.
got my foot in there. So yeah, I had to, hold down 2 jobs. At that
Right.
time, they weren't full time. So it was like 2 part-time jobs, right? Try to make it that full-time job
Right.
income, right? And it
Right.
was rough, Alba. Like it was so rough. I want to say I had to see a therapist. I had
Right.
to, yeah, like it was rough.
Of course. Yeah. And when you're
Like
in that storm, it's hard to see through
yeah,
what you're going through, what's right in front of you, right?
right. Like it was just so hard. I always remember that time and I remember like we didn't have sofas and
Mm-hmm.
my mom was like, "Oh, you have to watch this movie with the girls." And it was the movie Sing, right? It's just the first
Okay.
one. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the koala bear, his friend says, like, what are you gonna do? Like, you hit rock bottom, like and he's
Right.
like, he said, I'm gonna like chop up the quote, but he basically said, the good thing about hitting rock bottom is that there's one way to go, and that's to go up.
Oh
And when I
yes.
heard that, it stayed with me till this day because,
Right.
like I faced a divorce. I had to face him in court, till this day, sadly, unfortunately, I'm still facing, like child custody,
Right.
um, through the court system. But, my overall is I overcame the divorce. Yes, I became a single mom. But throughout those years of like my darkest seasons, I've learned so much that I say, I used to say why me, but now I say why not me, right? Because you go through the fire and
Right.
it's like a diamond in the rough, right? And then the diamond goes through fire. And that's exactly what these few years have been in my life.
Right.
um and I wouldn't even change it because it literally has helped me find like the real Crystal, right? Like the real
Right.
me,
Yeah.
amongst the darkness. I found myself. A lot of things, opportunities started opening up. I dedicated more self-care and self-love to me, myself, confidence. I love helping now women, especially that, are dealing with a similar situation.
Of course.
And I look at single moms not as a statistic anymore, because every situation is different, but I admire single moms now more than ever.
Of course,
Mhm.
yeah. Just being, I like I said, I was a single mom. My kids are grown now and they're out the house. But, you know, it's it's rough when you have that, when you feel like you're not enough to take over all these things, and then God comes in and says you are enough, right? You're
Mhm.
enough to deal with this burden because I'm here to carry you through.
Yep.
And when you're right in the storm, when you're seeing that storm happening and the tornadoes and the hurricane and everything flying all over the place, you're like, what the hell is going on?
Yep.
you know Once you get through it, and once obviously your kids are still young, you know but as a person who has been through it, I will tell you that the fruits of your labor will never ever be a mistake. You
Yeah.
will the fruits of your labor. And I know for me, my kid's father was there monetarily. um he would be here once in a blue moon and stuff like that. I tried to keep the communication open, and have him, you know, be there for the kids or whatever. It was a difficult situation because I was the one
Right.
putting forth the most effort for him to be there for them. Um, and eventually it got to a point where my daughter stopped talking to him, and I don't know if it's because she just had her child, 2 years ago, that
Mhm.
she kind of softened up a little bit, and she started building a relationship with him again. He has not changed in a lot of his aspects, but that's not my problem anymore.
Right.
I feel like you know they will have to deal with the relationship. The relationship is there, and they're starting from scratch, and that's what's most important.
Yeah.
In your case is a little different because of his mental health, so he's
Yeah.
not going to be conscious of the things that
No. Yeah.
you know hopefully your girls will continue to stay safe, and
Yes.
you stay safe as well.
Yeah.
So I know it's very hard. It's very hard, but you know trust me that when you see your kids grown and doing their own thing, you can say, you know what, the fruits of my labor was so worth it, so
Yes.
worth it.
Yes. And and
Yeah,
that's the good thing. At least, like you try to co-parent, right?
right, as best
Um,
as you can.
as you best as you can. But again, in my situation, it's so difficult because
Mhm,
again, he has a mental illness. He's not conscious, right? Like
mhm.
I don't know, he lives in his own reality,
Right.
and it's like, okay, that's not what happened, or this is not what that is. And
Exactly.
I do pray, pray for him that he does seek help for his mental illness, and
Yes,
gets the right medications and stays on it, and sees a psychiatrist and where he could be stable. um
of course.
and if one day he can have a relationship with his daughters,
Right,
that would be great.
right.
But I came from a single
Parent.
household, single parent household, and
Mhm.
my mom, she did amazing. And yeah, i
Right,
didn't i didn't have the greatest relationship with my dad, but
right,
we have a relationship, right? I learned to
right.
forgive him, you know
Mhm.
at a young age, in order for me to become the woman, that I am
Of
today. So
course.
I tell the same thing to my daughters, like,
Right,
just love him, and then one day when it makes sense, um, forgive him. But at the end of the day, it's
of
still your
course.
dad.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was fortunate. I mean, my mom was a single mom. However, my dad was always involved. My dad was always there. I was with him every other weekend. And when I became a teenager, I was more with him and his family versus my mom and my mom's family. But, not everybody has that, right? And
Right.
being a single mom is difficult because you have to play both parts. And in
Mhm.
my situation, since I live in Florida, originally from New York, like you, but I moved down to Florida because I wanted something different for my
Mhm.
children. Because after 9/11, I kind of put things into perspective and was like, damn, what else can I do to change this atmosphere for my children? And so that's why I moved down here to Florida. And, you know, it was hard for him to see the kids all the time or whatever, but I would offer and say, listen, I'm willing to sacrifice the holidays so that you can take them and spend time with them. And he was like, well, then you pay for their ticket. I'm like, excuse me, I'm making $9 an hour.
Yeah.
I can't afford that. I was like, I can't afford two plane tickets, mind you. You're working for UPS making like $20, $30 an hour, and you're asking me, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but it's funny. It's funny how, some people view things in a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
And I think for him it was more about trying to hurt me versus hurting the- you know but in the meantime he was hurting his children, basically,
Correct.
instead of hurting me,
Mhm.
and some people don't get that concept. And again, for your situation is different because it's the wellness and the protection for your kids, that
Yeah.
you want to make sure that your kids are in a safe place. For my situation, he was okay, not having any illnesses or anything like that. However, it was something that he just wanted to kind of get revenge over,
Right.
situation, which was ridiculous, and I'm like, listen, you know I'm letting you be a part of their life however you want, and you just do what you can, how you can, and that's all we can do. And a lot of the times, some, and not all, right, but some single parents don't realize that what they're doing is hurting their children, right?
Correct. Mhm.
In a certain situation, kind of like my situation, where it's not, it has nothing to do with mental health. It's just, you know him being who he is, and if I wanted to be a bitch per se, right? And say,
Yeah.
no, you can't see them because I'm mad at you because you play me dirty several times or whatever. That doesn't make any sense, you know. But um I just feel like some people need to look at these concepts and try to do what's best for the children, right?
Correct.
Do what's
Yep.
best for them, and for their protection, for their health, and just be aware of all those things. And again, like I said, I was so inspired by your story,
Mhm.
and everything that you were saying. I was just like, oh my God, you know, and, knowing you during that season, I didn't know that you were going through that, right? And that's
Yeah.
another thing I guess we can talk about, because
Yeah.
us women, we're so good at, keeping that straight face, right? I guess, like, faking it until you make it, or,
Yep.
doing all these things. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she was going through that, especially, us seeing her all the time. She always had that big smile on her face. She was always so happy, always laughing. And I was like, oh my
Yeah.
God.
Listen,
Yeah.
that makeup helped
Yeah.
me through that season because
That-
I was able to hide my sadness behind makeup,
right.
like I was
Mhm.
able to hide how I was feeling so broken, like,
Right.
not being able to sleep, crying during the nights. Like I was able to hide all of that, through makeup. And every time I remember I used to, put my face on, like I say, it would literally like change my mood,
Yep.
you know, and it really helped. It really did help me.
Yes. 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 I know, girl. I've been through my seasons too. So again, like I said, we know how to just, put things where they need to be, and kind of, like I say, check it at the door when you're going to work, right? Whatever is bothering
Yes,
you outside of work, you check it out, put it at the door. And then when you come when you come out, right, back out of
yes,
work, and you just pick that bag back up and say, okay, what am I going to do with you today?
exactly,
you know
exactly. Yep.
yeah, it's crazy, crazy, crazy. But you know again, as we are in that storm, it's kind of hard to see past it, but God always prevails. and
He
and I
does.
believe that totally, totally, totally.
He really does. I tell you, like, he has shown out
Mhm.
And I think now it's like, now I'm at the point in my life, like anything tries to like knock me down, I'm literally like, I'll laugh. Like, oh, that's it?
Right.
Like, that's it? You think that's gonna bother me? Or, because
Right.
throughout the storm, like I got to see God, right? His hand, right,
Yeah.
over our lives. And my faith has increased
Awesome.
tremendously, where to the point it's just like, okay, this is nothing. This too shall pass. And that's like my new saying, this too shall pass.
Of course.
Like when you go through storms, it's like, okay, what is it that I need to learn, right, from this?
Mhm.
And
Yep.
there's a lot of people that stay in that storm. I want to say that stay like in this pit when it's like, no, you need to get up, right? And that's what my mom used to always tell me, you need to get up. You need to get up. And I would work a lot, like work, because then
Yes.
I would forget about my problems, right?
Right.
And I was like, no, I can't remain no longer in this pit. Like you get tired,
Yes.
right? You just get tired
Of
of it, and you're
course.
like, okay, no, we're not doing this again today, because the longer that you remain in that, it's like the longer the test or the storm is going to be. But the minute that you
Right.
say, all right, I can't control this had to happen, right?
Right.
um this is no longer like, it's something that I can't control. I'm gonna do what I can control and leave the rest to God. And it took me
Amen.
a while to get there. I'm telling you, it took me a while to get there. I
Mhm.
keep like, I was broken completely, because even fast forward a little bit, like 2 years later, the
Uh-huh.
court found that he was, like he wasn't mentally ill, and they did give him like 50-50.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, that if I thought the divorce broke me, no, that broke me,
Ooh.
because now I had to drop my daughters off into a place that they do not know, right?
Yes.
To someone that they haven't seen in like 2 years, unless it was supervised. Now it's not supervised. And then at that point, I had to like, you know, retain an attorney. And
Okay.
I was like, all right, I don't know how I'm gonna afford this, but I need an attorney at this point, because I need to appeal this, because at the end of the day, this man is mentally ill, right? There's
Right.
records that show that he is. So I had to go through that, and that was rough. That was rough. When I
Yes.
say like my like, I talk about, I don't want to cry, but I had
Mhm.
to literally like surrender and say,
Right.
all right, I can't control this. I try to do everything in my power to make everything change, but I couldn't. And then at that point, I had to have like a mature conversation with my daughters. I had to teach them to take care of one another. I had
Right.
to, this is how you wipe yourself, send them with clothes, with wipes, brush your hair. Like, and
Oh,
God is still so good, because even though I didn't understand that part, it
right.
was fast. Like they were there, no lie, like a month worth of spending time with
And
being with their dad, living in his household, until he had another episode, and now it got bad. Now it
oh,
was worse,
oh
but
my gosh.
luckily my children weren't in
There.
his custody at that time. And then
Oh,
that's when, DCF and my attorney, everyone, actually just got involved, and then he just disappeared again, right? So,
okay.
and then it was like right at the start of the pandemic, which was even
Oh
worse,
gosh.
because the world is shutting down, like, everything was extended a little bit longer. But I
Right.
even saw God's hand in that, that he just
Right.
made sure that my daughters weren't there for something traumatic to happen, right? And I was
Yes.
like, all right, you're still in control. And
Right.
so going through that, it's rough, right? Because you're like, okay, I'm trying to get out of the storm, and then you have like some type of sunlight, right? And then it's
Right.
like, boom, now this is like, I don't know, a tsunami, I want to say.
Right.
And because at this point it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, what else are you gonna do to me? Because this, if I'm like, this crushed me, like now you
Right.
crushed me seriously.
Yes.
And
Oh
so it was
gosh.
rough.
Mo-
Yeah, it was rough,
Yeah.
but I'm at the point that, I know there's victory at the end,
Right.
my God always, he always wins,
Provide.
provides, and he always turns any situation that is bad, he always turns it for good,
Yes.
and I've witnessed that. So that's why I know, like, okay, this too shall pass.
Right. And
Yeah.
when I'm a person who likes to be in control.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm just listening to you and I'm just like, how was she hanging on to those like letting go of those bricks, right? Because
Yeah.
that's exactly what you had. You had those bricks on your shoulders and you were like,
Mhm.
you know what, God, I know you got me through one, and I know you're gonna get me through this one. So it's
Mhm.
about blind faith and saying, you know what, this is gonna, like you said, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
that, whew, girl, my hairs keep standing up every time you're talking. I'm like, oh my god, that's rough. That is
Yeah.
really rough.
Mhm.
But I'm glad that
It was.
that you have the faith to be able to say, you know what, I know that this is going to get, everything is going to be resolved and it's going to be in my favor.
Yep.
And that is awesome. That is awesome. So,
Yeah.
um, I have another question for you.
Okay.
Um, Obviously, like you were saying, you were going through a storm and you probably felt like it's never going to end. But now that you are, what, a few years past some of this, storm, right? Because I'm sure that there's going to be one or two here or there still that you're still working on, right? um
Mhm.
Fast forward, I guess, to now, what are you grateful for as you look back, right? Because they always tell you don't look back, right? But when you look back, it's kind of like to reflect on what you've overcome.
Yep.
So what do you feel grateful for as you look at what you went through?
I'm okay, so I'm so grateful for a lot of things, right? But one
Uh-huh.
of the things that I'm grateful for is that while I was married, right, you as a woman, you become a wife, you become a mom, right? So
Right.
most times you lose your title as woman, right? You lose your title as self, right?
Yes.
Because I was no longer Crystal. I was like, oh, I'm his wife or I'm their mom, right? So I lost myself in the midst of marriage, in the midst of going through a divorce, in the midst of like the struggle. I lost myself. So one thing
Right.
that I'm extremely grateful for is finding myself again, right? Not the Crystal that was, pre-marriage or pre,
Right.
mom, but like that girl again, but now the mature version of who that girl is now,
Ooh,
where like that's what I'm so grateful for, because in
right.
the midst of it I learned not only to be a strong woman but to appreciate more,
Of
um
course.
like to have more connection with like with God, to be more compassionate towards other people, to at one point look at single moms differently, because
Of
again,
course.
I remember when it happened to me, I told my mom, I said I didn't want to be a single mom like you, right?
Right.
And that hurt her. She knew I was in pain, so she didn't
Right.
react to that, but I know
That's
it hurt
good.
her. Yeah, so she was like, okay, she's in pain. And then after, when I saw like the end of the tunnel, let's say, I said, man, I
Mhm.
wouldn't change this for anything, because I was raised by a strong single mom who had to play two roles, right?
Right.
Someone who showed me, she had to work a lot, but she was the main provider. I never lacked anything as a child. So I had
Right.
such a great example in my mom, that
Yep.
I was like, yo, you were not that I didn't want to be you, like you were my example of how to move forward, right?
Right.
So that's one thing that I do that I'm so grateful for, is again, just finding my true me, embracing this season of being a single mom, loving myself more, valuing myself more, having confidence, like the self-doubt is out the window, the sabotaging of self is out the window,
Awesome.
and basically, it's like knowing like this is how I am. You either take me how I am or you don't. I'm not changing for anyone, because
Right.
I was created a certain and a unique way. We all are, right? And then,
Yes.
like, and that's how people should accept you, right?
Of
So
course.
I that's one thing I'm extremely grateful, is that I found who Crystal is.
That is amazing. That is so amazing. Because it's so true how you lose yourself in being the parent, being the wife, being this, being that, and trying to please, I guess, people please everyone, right? Um,
Mhm.
for me, uh, I found it difficult when my children moved out. I was like, okay, I'm their mom, I'm this, I'm that. And after a certain age, they do their own thing, and you don't have to
Mhm.
be after them and, wash their clothes and all this other stuff that you do as a mom, right?
Right.
But but you're still watching out and making sure that emotionally they're okay, physically that they're okay, that they're going the right path and not you know turning to the left or turning to the right and going in a different direction than what's right for them, right?
Right.
And for me, after they moved out, I had such an issue with trying to find myself and find what other purposes I had in, who Elba was or who Elba
Right.
is, right? And so you're saying this, and I'm so glad that you're finding yourself now versus while your kids are out the house, and then you're like, contra, what am I gonna do with myself? What
Yeah.
what is my next journey? How am I gonna do this? How am I gonna do that? Right?
Right.
And I think that is amazing, amazing. And not for nothing, but a lot of the company that we were with before, that kind of opened up some things for me when it comes
Mhm.
to the affirmations. And I've always had a
Yes.
relationship with God, but it wasn't as close as I have now. You know, some things that you know kind of, I think for me, that business really gave me knowledge that I needed to move forward, right? Like
Yes.
at the moment, I didn't realize, and I'm like, okay, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with this, and blah, 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 blah. But when I look back at that, I say, wow, this has helped me with this thing, with this thing, with this thing, with this. And I'm just so grateful that I was able to have that in my season, right?
Yes, I
And
agree.
I think that just being able to identify with who you are and, not only be the mom, be the wife, like you said, but just be you and
Yep.
appreciate you and give yourself credit for all the things that you currently do or have done, like in my case,
Yes.
because my kids are big, right? So
Yes,
that is
I agree.
amazing. That is amazing, amazing. Okay, so for some final words for anyone who's going through something similar, like a similar situation that you are in, what advice would you give them?
Um, just stay positive, during, anything similar or, going through a divorce that can literally shake your world. Um, but everything happens for a reason. And we might not understand at that time what that reason is. Once we go through it, like opportunities and new blessings start coming, new doors are open where you do, like you said, you look back and you say, wow, look how far I've come, right?
Right.
But just remain positive, take the time to, instead of, being sad about it, say no, this had to happen, and rejoice in it. And I know it's hard to rejoice when you're like, your world is changing, but honestly rejoice because God doesn't do anything out of malintent, right? He
Right.
literally knows your desires of your heart. He knows your heart, right? He knows you, and he knows, okay, she chose this. Unfortunately, it's not going to probably work out, but there's something better on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And you never know, the reason why you're going through it is so that you too could help someone else, right? You could too help other women. You're gonna encounter and meet a lot of and have connections with women that have similar, or something similar, or going through it, or maybe not. They just need your wisdom, right? Because once you go
Right.
through an experience, you have now that wisdom of it, right? So
Yeah.
now you're able to pour into this woman's life and say the words that are needed to help her overcome, right? So it's just like when you're going through it, journal. I used to journal a lot. Get all that, dump all that what you're feeling onto paper.
Right.
Put your face on, meaning put some makeup on. If you're not into makeup, fix your hair, get dressed, right? Get out of bed, take a walk, find something that you like to do to distract you from thinking of what is going on. Read more, meditate, have time alone, time alone where it's just before, if you have kids, before the kids wake up, wake up at least, let's say, an hour early
Yes.
where you have your alone time, and at that time you can pray, read your bible, again meditate, whatever it is that you need to do to refuel yourself. Do that, if even if it's just taking a bath, right, a bubble bath,
Right.
or
Yeah.
just sitting in the silence and just clearing out your thoughts. Like, take that time for you, because you can't pour into other people if you're empty, right? And you can't be a happy mom if I'm telling you, if you don't take that time, then you're not a happy mom, and then it's like you're frustrated. No, I learned to take my extra hour every morning, um before my daughters wake up, and that helps me set the day. It helps me
Awesome.
put the intention. So do the same thing. It's gonna pass. But the more you think about it, the more you have like that pity, the victim mentality, you're gonna stay in that storm way longer. But the moment that you say, okay, I cannot control this, this is out of my control. So I'm gonna leave it, the hands of God, I'm gonna leave it to Him, right? And I'm gonna do what's best, and I'm gonna do what I can control, and try not to, like, life is happening, right? It's like, what's that saying? Life is happening to you, not for you, right? Something like that.
Of
You
course.
know, take it that way and take it day by day, and just know that storms are not meant to last forever, right? The
Right.
sun will shine again, and I tell you that like the sun is going to shine bright when it does
Yes.
shine, when the storm does pass. And just know, I always say, this too shall pass. Find peace within the storm,
Right.
and just get yourself up, don't stay there, and always say, I was made for more. I know what, God has showed me. I know what, the desires of my heart, like, I'm going to get all that. All that I'm going to receive after I overcome.
Yes, yes, those tests, right? Those tests
Yeah.
that God puts that I mean, God doesn't put those tests in there, but those tests will be your testimony. And
Yes.
oh
Yes.
my gosh, girl,
Yes. And
just
when they become your testimony, you're like, I'm so glad that I went through that.
right.
Like, I'm telling you. And I wasn't even intending to like have this whole podcast thing talk about God, but
Yeah, I
to be honest, I really wasn't. It wasn't going to be a God conversation, but at the end of the
right.
day, I have to give
Yes,
glory to Him, because literally, like, if it wasn't, there's no other higher power, right?
right.
That literally moved and shifted and did all that they like did for in my life and in my children's life, except
Yes.
that higher power, which is God. And I wasn't even,
Amen.
Alba, I wasn't even planning on talking about God, but it's
Girl, we can talk about anything on this podcast, anything. And you know what? God is always number one. And I will say that no matter
yes.
what, I've
And
been through my
what's so,
storms.
yeah. No, and
Yeah,
I've always said it. I said, God, I know I'm going through all of this, and one day when I do share my story, because I know, right, you have a testimony. Everyone has a
yeah,
story to share, right? Everyone has a story to tell.
yeah.
Like, in the day that I do, I'll make sure to let people know what you did for me, because
Amen.
that's the only way, right?
Yes, yes, girl. My hairs are standing up again. I completely understand what you're talking about because,
Yeah.
girl, I've been through some things and I'm just like, God, where are you when I'm in the storm, right? And then when
Yeah.
I get out of it and I say, wow, This is a testimony of of saying, you know what, this is the reason why you were still in there, because you kept dwelling on it. Lift it up to God and tell God, I cannot carry this burden anymore. And
Yep.
He will move mountains. And when I say
Yep.
mountains, He will move mountains for you. And
Yep.
I truly, truly believe that, you know.
Yep.
I
Me
truly
too.
believe it. I
Me
believe it
too.
all the way. Yes, 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 yes.
Me too.
Yep. So I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. I Let me tell you something. This podcast, I created it because God put that in my heart to start this podcast. And my podcast is basically there for journeys that you have overcome, things that you have been through. And I'm so happy and I'm thankful that you said yes to be on my podcast. I'm
Listen,
like I said,
I read your message and I was like, "Of course." And I'm so excited for you that you're doing
thank
this
you.
podcast and that, I'm just when I knew that you were doing a podcast, I said, "Man, good for her." Like literally good for her. You have always
Thank
been
you.
a beautiful light, a beautiful personality, and I'm so glad, through, that business that we met each other, we stayed
Yes,
connected, and that
yes.
you're doing this. This is amazing.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
amazing.
you.
Keep it
Thank
up. It's
you.
amazing. And thank you for having me.
You're welcome, girl. Thank you for saying yes. I
Yes.
absolutely, again, my hairs keep standing up every time I hear the story of what you've overcome. And
Yeah.
I will continue to keep you in my prayers. And may God bless you and continue to have you there to do your
Thank
thing
you.
too, girl. Because I know
Thank
you're
you.
doing
Thank
a
you.
lot of amazing things right now too, with your business, with your,
Yes.
with your life, with your children, and your mom too. May she be blessed for saying, you
Yes.
know what, Contra, I'm gonna put on my big girl panties and help my baby.
Yeah, she sure did. Like she sure did. Now, like, she sees everything I overcome. I lead,
Right,
I do lead a group of women.
right,
And again, I'm like, yo, this, God was preparing me for such time as this, right?
yes,
Because everyone has a purpose and a calling. And I finally now feel like, yes, I'm in that purpose, I'm in that calling.
yes,
And life is great. Like I'm telling you, life is so good that I am, again, I always look back and I cry of just being grateful because I'm like,
yes,
man, like life right now is good, and life might not always be like that. You will get your storms and your tests, but you
right,
know, again, now you learn how to deal with them, right?
yes.
So yeah, I'm
Oh,
super, super grateful.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Trust me, I believe it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
All
thank you
right.
again, Mamita.
Thanks,
I am
Alba.
so, so grateful. And let's stay in touch, okay?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, sweetie. Have a
Okay.
good day.
You too, hon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.